What if I told you there was a secret so ancient and so carefully guarded that, if revealed, it could not only change the way you view every woman who walks alone, but also profoundly reshape your understanding of the very role of women in human history and the invisible fabric that sustains our beliefs? Imagine hearing this from someone who, when she closed her eyes and fell asleep, crossed invisible boundaries, explored intangible realms, and returned with answers that challenged certainties. Cemented for millennia, carrying stories that stretched beyond time and matter, Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, conducted over 14,000 spiritual readings, bringing to light mysteries about health, destiny, karma, and the essence of the human soul. Among all these teachings, there was one revelation often overlooked, perhaps because of its explosive potential. Women who live alone are not incomplete. They are accessing something much greater, an ancient force that slumbers in most and awakens in few. It's like unlocking an inner door to a knowledge that transcends this life, a silent force that threatens the foundation of power structures built over centuries, and that, if fully unleashed, could reshape human relationships in their entirety. That's why, historically, they've been so disturbing. For Cayce, it wasn't a matter of tradition or social convention, but of spiritual laws as ancient as consciousness itself, laws that explain why different cultures, in different times and places, repeat like a mantra the narrative that a woman needs a man to be fulfilled. Cayce asserted that certain female souls come into the world with the specific mission of experiencing periods of solitude as an essential part of their spiritual evolution, a necessary rite of passage to access divine feminine consciousness, a rare vibrational field where mind and spirit align with absolute precision, like two harmonic notes resonating at the same frequency. Imagine an underground river of crystal-clear waters blocked by dense layers of social concrete. When a woman rejects the search for external validation, small fissures begin to form in this blockage, and the water, previously trapped, begins to rise, irrigating not only her life but also the entire environment around her. Each gesture of independence is not only personal, it breaks invisible codes inscribed in the collective unconscious, and initiates a process of silent reprogramming of the human psyche, altering, drop by drop, the course of history. Records of the past show that priestesses, oracles, and healers without husbands were feared, revered, and often persecuted figures. This wasn't unfounded superstition, but rather the recognition, albeit unconscious, that they held something that could shift the balance of power. For Cayce, this was no coincidence. Living alone reactivates ancestral memories and abilities, reconnecting these women to spiritual functions that transcend the individual dimension and touch the energetic network that sustains entire communities. However, visible and invisible forces have always arisen to contain this awakening. Emotional dependence cultivated for centuries, collective fear fueled by limiting narratives, and subtle or explicit social pressures act as walls to prevent this source of power from overflowing. When awakened, this consciousness grants women sharper intuition, a sensitivity capable of perceiving hidden patterns, and unrestricted access to an invisible library that stores all knowledge of human experience, from ancient times to future possibilities. Cayce warned that the first test would be to resist the seduction of fitting into the social mold, simply to gain acceptance and relief from external pressure. The true test is to trust in the direct connection with the divine, even under judgment, isolation, and misunderstanding. He saw a growing movement of women responding to a call that has resonated since time immemorial, like a bell that has never stopped ringing. And he knew that when enough women reach this frequency, profound changes, social, spiritual, and political, would become inevitable and irreversible. The future he described did not depend on external systems to legitimize anyone's completeness. It was a world where fulfillment springs from within, from an unbreakable connection with one's own essence, where relationships cease to be foundations of identity and become choices of abundance. And each woman who chooses this path not only redefines her own life, she alters, invisibly but powerfully, the collective destiny. It is as if, with each choice, seeds are planted for a new global consciousness, a consciousness that, according to Cayce, could very well be the key to humanity's next evolutionary leap, a leap that will change not only how we live, but who we are in the deepest sense of the word. Imagine that for a moment you could see beyond the surface of things. Walking down the street, You see a woman sitting alone in a cafe, reading a book or looking out the window, and something about her awakens a feeling difficult to explain. It's not just serenity. It's as if she carries an invisible field, a presence that doesn't seek approval, that doesn't beg to be seen. It's precisely this kind of presence that Edgar Cayce spoke of when he spoke of the hidden code of feminine independence. For him, the absence of a relationship wasn't a void, but a free space for something much deeper to flourish. And it's in this space that older memories and abilities begin to return. Cayce said that when a woman lets go of the constant need to complete herself through another, she releases vital energy that was previously dispersed in maintaining artificial harmonies or conforming to expectations. This energy, redirected inward, activates an almost invisible but extremely powerful process. It is at this moment that memories of other lives begin to emerge. Images of ancient temples, silent chambers where sacred words were spoken, stone halls lit only by torches, where decisions of state depended on her voice. These memories come not as a clear film, but as sensations, recurring dreams, intuitions that seem to have no origin in the current life. He argued that these memories are not inventions or fantasies of a creative mind. They are real fragments of a vast archive, the Akashic records, which contain the entire experience of the soul. And the most provocative detail of this revelation is that accessing these records does not depend on formal study or elaborate rituals. It depends on an internal state that, according to Cayce, is easier to achieve when the feminine consciousness is not distracted or filtered by the constant need to fulfill the role of partner. This doesn't mean, as he made clear, that love or companionship are enemies of this process. What he warned about was that, for certain women, premature involvement can become a curtain that blocks the light. Imagine an ancient Egyptian priestess who, in another life, dedicated herself to interpreting divine signs to guide the community. Upon reincarnation, she carries within herself that same latent ability. However, if her energy is entirely absorbed by maintaining validation in a relationship where her essence is not recognized, this ability remains dormant. Cayce spoke of examples that, even without naming names, could be recognized in our daily lives. The woman who, upon separation, fears emptiness and loneliness, but after months begins to have more vivid dreams, creative ideas that emerge from nowhere, or a heightened perception of the people and situations around her. The businesswoman who, after years of dedicating herself to a marriage where she couldn't fully express her ideas, when living alone, initiates innovative projects, finds creative solutions to long-standing problems, and realizes that her reasoning and intuition have become clearer. This awakening, he says, isn't limited to mystical spiritual gifts. It often translates into practical skills, more assertive leadership, heightened creativity, greater clarity about one's own path. And this is what makes the phenomenon so threatening to established structures, because such women are not only emotionally free, but also capable of influencing, inspiring, and leading. However, Cayce also made it clear that this activation of consciousness does not happen passively. It requires conscious choices, even if discreet, that go against the flow of social pressure. It requires, for example, saying no to a relationship just to fill a silence. It requires enduring the stares and comments of those who interpret loneliness as failure. It requires standing firm when friends and family suggest it's time to find someone. And here comes a suspenseful point that Cayce made a point of emphasizing. The closer a woman gets to this frequency, the more subtle forces begin to act to distract her or divert her focus. He said that these forces don't always manifest as dramatic obstacles. Sometimes they're seemingly harmless opportunities that demand time, energy, and attention, taking her away from her inner connection. They can be attractive but unaligned relationships, interesting but draining projects, invitations to social routines that seem pleasant but disconnect her from her own essence. He compared it to a sacred garden. When the soil begins to grow fertile, invasive weeds emerge more quickly. If left unattended, they take over the space and prevent the true seeds from growing. The same happens with this awareness. Without vigilance, external distractions take over and suffocate what was about to flourish. But there was also a surprising element in Cayce's readings. He said that by strengthening this inner connection, a woman not only transforms herself, but also generates a ripple effect in the collective field. It's as if, by accessing her own memories and abilities, she leaves an energetic imprint in the environment, facilitating the same process for other women, including those she will never meet personally. This means that each choice to remain true to one's essence is not just an individual act, but a silent service to the collective consciousness. Perhaps the most striking example Cayce gave was that of women who, without knowing why, always felt a deep discomfort with certain social dynamics. Women who, even surrounded by people, felt that something inside them was on hold, as if waiting for a signal to awaken. For him, this signal is the very decision to stop seeking outside what can only be found within. This is the central tension of this section, the recognition that true transformation does not depend on major external changes, but on a radical shift in how a woman perceives herself and her role in the world. And as Cayce insisted, this is only the beginning of a process that, once begun, cannot be interrupted without leaving a profound mark. And it is precisely in this transition between what was and what is beginning to be that lies the greatest challenge and, at the same time, the greatest promise. Because, according to him, what awaits on the other side of this awakening is not just greater autonomy, but a life in which past and present unite to create something few people in the world can imagine. And for many, the first glimpse of this comes silently, in an ordinary moment, when they realize that something within them has changed forever. Cayce said that no true awakening occurs without resistance, and this is an immutable law that permeates all processes of profound transformation. This resistance is not limited to obvious obstacles or obvious challenges. It often infiltrates so subtly that it goes unnoticed, manifesting itself in trivial situations, seemingly harmless words, or even thoughts and emotions that arise without explanation. It can take the form of well-intentioned advice, seductive opportunities, or unexpected changes that at first glance seem neutral, but which deep down have the precise effect of slowing or diverting the journey. It is as if each step toward personal sovereignty activates automatic containment mechanisms, as if ancient forces were trying to preserve a balance that no longer serves, but which the system insists on maintaining at any cost. In some cases, this resistance is so subtle that it merges with the inner voice itself, creating doubts and questions that gradually erode resolve. He described three main sources of this resistance. The first was composed of so-called low-vibration entities, not necessarily supernatural figures, but energetic and emotional patterns that feed on fear, dependence, and insecurity. These patterns strengthen when they manage to keep someone trapped in repetitive cycles of conflict or draining emotional attachments, making it difficult to realize that the prison is not physical, but psychological. The second source came from other women who, even without conscious ill intent, reacted to someone's awakening with discomfort, criticism, or judgment. It's an unconscious reflex. Seeing another woman living fully and without depending on external approval can trigger internal wounds, deep insecurities, and even feelings of threat. The third, and most comprehensive, was in the collective unconscious, an invisible field born for thousands of years of the belief that women need men for security, purpose, and value. Breaking this, Cayce said, is like opening cracks in a wall that supports centuries of cultural conditioning, generating discomfort, even in those not directly involved in the process. Cayce explained that understanding the origin of these resistances is essential to neutralizing them consciously and strategically. He recommended three fundamental practices: inner vigilance, emotional discipline, and constant alignment with one's own truth. Inner vigilance consists of noticing subtle signs that something or someone is trying to manipulate your emotions, sow doubt, or undermine your confidence. Emotional discipline is the deliberate choice not to react impulsively, preserving energy and mental clarity. And alignment with one's own truth means remaining true to what one knows to be right, even under criticism, pressure, or misunderstanding, continually reinforcing one's integrity. He also provoked a reflection that reversed common logic. What if the resistance you feel now is actually a clear sign that you're moving in the right direction? This shift in perspective alters your relationship with difficulties. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the question becomes, "What does this situation want to teach me about my strength and who I truly am?" For Cayce, every challenge is a test in disguise, an opportunity to close gaps where opposing forces could act, further strengthening your personal frequency and clarity of purpose. He reinforced that this understanding reduces the emotional weight of resistance, transforming it into fuel for progress. Ultimately, he believed that resistance is not an enemy to be destroyed, but an accurate indicator of progress. If nothing tries to stop your movement, you may not yet be touching the structures that truly need to be transformed. For every woman who understands this and chooses to remain true to herself, even under intense pressure, resistance loses some of its power. It is at this point that the individual journey expands and connects to something much larger, a silent, persistent, and transformative movement that grows with each conscious decision, multiplying with each living example, and that opens space for other women to also awaken, strengthen their roots, and move forward together toward a new collective consciousness. Edgar Cayce asserted that all true spiritual advancement is not limited to the individual, but reverberates through families, communities, and future generations, silently shaping history and taking deep root in the invisible fabric of society. What begins as an intimate decision, choosing to live independently and spiritually sovereign, can become a profound catalyst for collective change, influencing entire cultures and even directing the course of historical events, often without its protagonists realizing the magnitude of their act. He described it as a living, breathing chain reaction. The courage of a single human being, acting in alignment with their truth, could inspire dozens, then hundreds, and later thousands, to rethink their routines, beliefs, relationships, and even the systems they considered immutable. It is like a discrete spark that, upon finding the right fuel, ignites fires that spread across entire territories, illuminating spaces previously dominated by conformity and fear, and rekindling a flame of autonomy that can span centuries. In his detailed records, Cayce recounted stories of women who broke limiting patterns and reinvented themselves on levels that went beyond the personal, achieving community and even global impact. Some left relationships that drained their energy and discovered dormant talents. Others abandoned careers incompatible with their essence and created new ways to serve the community, founding schools, social projects, or support networks. Many faced the crushing weight of family traditions, facing criticism, isolation, and active resistance, and in overcoming them, transformed not only their lives, but the fate of generations that followed. One of them, at 52, ended a decades-long marriage, faced harsh criticism and accusations of selfishness, but in just 2 years, she launched a thriving business, began speaking on spirituality, formed study groups, inspired other women to follow similar paths, and became a mentor respected by hundreds. For Cayce, this strength arose from the alignment between independence and spiritual purpose, a balance capable of generating concrete changes, renewed health, prosperity, positive influence, and a palpable sense of fulfillment that extended to everyone around him. He drew on history to reinforce his thesis, recalling that in ancient civilizations, from Egyptian temples to indigenous villages and Asian courts, women outside the conjugal model were seen as guardians of knowledge, ritual leaders, artists, advisors to rulers, military strategists, and healers with a central role in collective decisions. Far from threatening, they were anchors of spiritual and social stability. This autonomy, Cayce argued, did not fragment society. On the contrary, it sustained entire communities in times of crisis, war, or cultural transition, serving as a silent and essential pillar, the fixed point that maintained cohesion when everything around them was transformed. For him, the absence of these figures resulted in periods of collective fragility and a loss of moral direction. The most intriguing point for him was the nearly invisible connection between individual choices and collective transformations. Each decision, true to one's essence, sent an energetic signal to the collective unconscious, like concentric ripples generated by a stone in a pond that multiply until they touch distant shores, creating changes at different rates. Small changes, reorganizing one's day, rejecting something misaligned with one's principles, defending a value in the face of opposition, or choosing strategic silence, could influence the values and behaviors of entire communities, albeit subtly and slowly, paving the way for quiet revolutions. But he warned, the more intense the advance, the more the system creates sophisticated forms of resistance, stereotypes repeated in the media, incessant distractions that drain focus, economic structures that reinforce dependencies, and even cultural narratives that attempt to romanticize submission. Therefore, he advocated for mutual support networks and intentional meeting spaces where women could share experiences, strengthen convictions, impart teachings, and celebrate victories without fear of judgment, creating a network of collective energy that sustained individual courage. He observed that, in historical periods of cultural evolution, the number of women choosing spiritual and social autonomy increased, generating a cumulative effect that accelerated transformations. For Cayce, this indicated an expansion of collective consciousness and the strengthening of a new paradigm, opening paths for everyone, including men seeking to redefine their own roles and establish more balanced relationships. He concluded that feminine spiritual freedom is an expansive and creative force that elevates collective creativity, enhances social resilience, and opens doors to innovative and sustainable solutions in times of crisis. Each woman who chooses this personal sovereignty becomes, consciously or not, an architect and guardian of a more balanced, luminous, and profoundly human future for all. And this legacy, he said, is impossible to erase, as it is engraved not only in cultural memory, but in the very energy field of humanity, like a light that even when threatened, always finds a way to keep shining. Edgar Cayce said there comes a point when the quest for spiritual sovereignty ceases to be merely a personal path and becomes a breaking point, a point of no return that separates those who dare to see the truth from those who choose to remain in the comfortable shadows of illusion. He believed that every soul approaching this threshold feels almost physically the invisible resistance of the world. It's not just the judgment of those close to them or the disguised criticism. It's a diffuse pressure coming from all sides, as if the very structure of the collective were trying to pull the individual back within the walls of a castle that no longer offers protection, only imprisonment. Cayce saw this phase as the most delicate and dangerous test, because it is here that doubt creeps in, loneliness intensifies, and the temptation to give in to old social roles presents itself disguised as sanity. He said that, at this stage, the soul begins to see the hidden workings of human dynamics with disturbing clarity. It's as if veils are falling, revealing that many relationships are not sustained by genuine affection, but by silent exchanges of power, dependence, and fear. This insight does not come without a cost. According to Cayce, it is at this point that many are tempted to abandon the process, realizing that, to fully experience spiritual independence, it will be necessary to renounce certain emotional comforts, immediate validations, and even old narratives that once gave meaning to life. The renunciation here is not just material, it is psychic. It is the voluntary surrender of all that no longer resonates with the soul's frequency. When recounting stories of women who had made this journey, Cayce described common signs, vivid dreams that seemed to carry coded messages, coincidences that aligned events in ways that were almost impossible to ignore, and a sense of time becoming distorted, some days stretching into introspective silence, others passing as if they were minutes, filled with synchronicities. He saw this not as an anomaly, but as proof that consciousness, as it expanded, was already beginning to touch more subtle layers of reality. It is at this point that choices cease to be mere choices and become spiritual declarations. But Cayce warned that the real danger came not from without, but from within. The ego, realizing it is losing control, creates sophisticated traps, doubts disguised as prudence, selective longing for moments that were never as good as memory insists, and even a nostalgia for the role of victim, because within it is embedded familiarity and a certain distorted form of power. To move forward, a quiet courage is required, one that seeks neither witnesses nor applause, a determination that remains even when nothing around seems to confirm that the chosen path is the right one. He recalled that, in ancient times, those who reached this level of detachment were trained to protect their energy with rituals, strategic isolation, and selective alliances. Today, the arena has changed, but the principle remains the same. Preserving inner clarity requires refusing invitations to useless battles, avoiding distractions in debates that only fuel polarization, and above all, cultivating an inner life so rich that no external approval is necessary to sustain the journey. For Cayce, the true power that emerges at this stage is not the power to dominate others, but the power not to be dominated. And this invulnerability deeply disturbs systems based on control through fear. He asserted that when a woman achieves this inner integrity, the impact on the collective is immediate. Those close to her begin to act differently. Some distance, others approach with curiosity, and some react with hostility as if they were standing before a mirror revealing something they don't want to see. What makes this stage so critical, according to Cayce, is that it requires the individual to walk between two worlds, that of the old order, which still tries to impose its invisible laws, and that of the new consciousness, which is not yet fully manifested. It is like crossing a narrow bridge in thick fog, knowing that each step must be taken with absolute attention. Any distraction could mean falling back into the old prison. In his accounts, he recounted that many of the women who persevered at this point experienced a qualitative leap, not only in their spiritual perceptions, but also in the way they created and positioned themselves in the world. Projects were born with sudden clarity, opportunities arose from unlikely encounters, and even obstacles revealed themselves as disguised portals to deeper levels of purpose. However, Cayce reinforced, none of this is possible without crossing the desert of uncertainty, where old guarantees dissolve, and the only reliable compass is the inner voice. As they progressed, these women reported a curious shift. Solitude ceased to be a burden and began to be perceived as fertile territory, where ideas, intuitions, and creative forces emerged without the noise of external interference. This internal reconfiguration is neither romantic nor painless, but it is transformative. It is the stage where identity ceases to be defined by the past and begins to be shaped by the future the soul already envisions. Cayce concluded his reflections on this point with a provocation. What if all the chaos, resistance, and confusion that arise in this process were not signs of error, but confirmation that the path is working? What if discomfort were not an enemy, but a demanding teacher, shaping consciousness to withstand the breadth of freedom that lies ahead? For him, this was the essence of the journey, understanding that true sovereignty is not a refuge, but a territory to be conquered step by step in solitude and courage, until it becomes as natural as breathing. Edgar Cayce said that true transformation is not a sudden event, but a silent, constant, and relentless process, like erosion shaping stone, roots breaking through concrete, or the tide slowly reshaping the shore. What has been revealed so far is not merely an intellectual understanding. It is a profound, almost secret summons, meant only for those ready to listen. This choice cannot be taken lightly, for it requires courage and fierce discipline to sustain what few will have the strength to carry. The path that opens before you, according to Cayce, separates those who merely dream of change from those who embody it, until they become unrecognizable to the world they left behind. Here's the uncomfortable truth. There is no middle ground on this path. Spiritual independence is not an ornament to be donned and removed at the whim of circumstances. It is a deep cut, a rupture with centuries of cultural and emotional conditioning. This choice means losing connections, displeasing people who expected a predetermined role from you, and often feeling the cold weight of loneliness, not as an absence, but as confirmation that you have crossed over into another territory. Cayce called this moment the portal of clarity, the moment when all that is false falls away and only the essential remains. Most retreat here, but it is precisely at this point that true sovereignty begins. If you've stayed this far, it's because something inside you recognizes the call. Cayce taught a secret plan for going through this process, not a mechanical checklist, but a sequence of internal movements capable of reconfiguring your consciousness from the inside out. First, eliminate the voices that don't belong to your essence. This doesn't mean impulsively pushing everyone away, but clearly observing which habits, words, and environments drain your vital energy. Silence is the first weapon. Then, create daily rituals that affirm your wholeness. Wake up with a clear intention, nourish your body consciously, record dreams and perceptions, and act without depending on anyone's approval. The third movement is the most challenging, confronting one's own ancestral fears. Cayce believed that cellular memory carries patterns of submission and dependence accumulated over generations. To break them, one must face the situations that most provoke insecurity, act, speak, decide even under pressure to retreat. Only then will the old programming dissolve. The fourth step is to expand. With the energy previously trapped, create. Develop projects, build authentic connections, Shape works that express your new sovereign identity. Each action is a seed sown in the collective field. And finally, protect this state with constant vigilance. The world will try to pull you back into conformity, sending temptations disguised as opportunities or relationships. This is where discipline becomes armor. Recognize the pitfalls and stay true to the bigger vision, even in silence. The impact of this path goes beyond the personal. Cayce saw each person who achieved this sovereignty as a bright spot on the invisible map of humanity. The more spots emerge, the faster the collective field transforms. Your decision shapes a future in which men and women unite by choice and purpose, not fear or dependence. The responsibility is now yours. You can turn off this video and return to the life the world expects of you. Or you can begin the journey to become what Cayce envisioned, a complete being, needing nothing external to make an impact. Start today with a single act that asserts your sovereignty. Repeat tomorrow. One act at a time, one day at a time. This is how a different destiny is written. If this message resonated with you, sign up for Deep Psyche now. Like the video so it reaches others who need to hear this truth, and leave your questions or experiences in the comments, even anonymously. Each shared story becomes a flame in the fire we light together. The time is now, and the choice is yours.